Well, we've been waiting for it, and we now have some evidence. We have not a lot of games, but there were a couple of one that was a shocker in a way, and then one that almost was, but SMU was able to survive in their game against Nevada up in Reno. Good afternoon. New week, the first full week of the college football season. David Smoak with both Paul Catalina and Craig Smoak on the set. The rambling wreck of Georgia Tech. Brent Pry, what he's done. Haynes King, what he's done. And a stat about Haynes King in just a minute. And former Baylor commit Zach Pyron scored a touchdown in that game. A lot to get to. And we'll start, Craig and Paul, with the game in Dublin, Ireland.
Well, for the tragic ending for my people, but
hey, college football's back, Paul.
Yeah, it's great.
Aren't you so excited? It's so great.
Yeah, start 0-1. Way to go. And then the amount of trash talk that Florida State's going to get just because our fans have been out there in the world just pooping on everything. So it comes back to you. I understand that. What I don't understand is people who like fans of not that are that don't have the same kind of pedigree, chalk and trash. But
no, you can't do that.
I can. I absolutely can.
No, I've learned how to get away from being able to go, yeah, but we have 5 national titles.
Yeah, but I do think that a lot of them
they earned a lot of the retribution and all the.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
They earned a lot of that. I think though that some of the fans like taking a victory lap need to look in their own backyard though.
All right, welcome to college football, Paul.
Yeah.
Like that's like the whole thing, man.
But yeah, no, I get it. I just think there should be some decorum. But no, Georgia Tech is a tough team. They were playing a lot better. And the Dublin games are always not exactly how you'd think they'd go, which is good for the underdog. And why Vegas thought that they were 11-point dogs, I don't know, especially given the scenario. But Florida State's defensive line, not nearly as good as advertised yet, really got pushed around. And DJU is very bland.
I thought that's the part, Craig, that really kind of surprised me is the DJU. To me, I thought I would see a little bit more athleticism, which obviously I have not watched enough of him. He looked very much as if he was sometimes running in mud.
DJU looked like what a lot of people said DJU was probably going to look like for Florida State. For those who weren't over the moon about that addition and not reacting like it was one of the colossal, massive gets of the offseason, I thought it was a good pickup for Florida State given their circumstances and losing Jordan Travis, and won't pretend to act like I didn't think DJU was going to and will still be pretty good for Florida State. But I do think it was either the first time a lot of people had watched him or maybe just the bubble of the offseason and how everything that happens is perfect. It's just getting bursts because, yeah, he was a guy who caught a lot of flack on Saturday. That's for certain. No matter where you were looking, he was not great and had some moments that were pretty, some big 4th down conversions there late in the game, but not, I think, what you were hoping for, and especially not what you were hoping to follow up Jordan Travis with, I think is fair to say if you're Florida State fans. So, yeah, very rocky start for the Noles. I do think it is a reminder, though, and this probably happens every single year of we all do this to some extent. I think we're all probably guilty of this to some extent. But, hey, they were good last year. They went and got a bunch of people in the portal. They'll be good again. We do that, and we do that a lot. And, the thing with Florida State, I think we had to think of, which one of these teams in the top 10 is unlikely to be here at the end. And I was like,
yep,
that's tough. And I was looking at it originally, I thought it was just get out of the top 10. But Florida State was a good candidate for that. And it's but man, they've got this back and they've got this back. And it's but they also lost a lot, man. You just don't, maybe if you're Georgia, you do. Maybe if you're Alabama, you do. And even if you're a blue blood, that doesn't mean that you always do, but you replace a lot. The transfer portal's not magic. It's not like an instant upgrade across the board. And so I'm interested to see for a lot of teams out there this weekend of who's been really, really high because of what they went and got the portal or lost a lot and expect they're just going to replace it and get the rude awakening of it's just not that easy. And I think Florida State got that reminder early on. Georgia Tech deserves a ton of credit. Loved watching Haynes King be able to do his thing. Great win for the Yellow Jackets. And, just a brutal way for Florida State to start, and they got their they got their receipts on social media on Saturday, that's for sure. A lot of people ready and rip-roaring to go to give them hell. And Kirk Herbstreit was one of those, and a whole lot of others, man. And you can't say that it wasn't deserved in some ways because of the offseason going the way that it did.
Well, again, it wasn't last year's team that was really damn good. And they did get skewered, no matter how it worked out, because of who they were and then the injury to Jordan Travis. Florida State was 17-1 in season openers as a top 10 team, which also says that 18 times, now 19, they have been ranked in the top 10 in the preseason, which is with those years of Bowden and then in the last year or two as well. The only loss in that time was against Brett Favre and Southern Miss in 1989. Haynes King joins that list of quarterbacks to beat the top 10 ranked Seminoles. The former Longview and Texas A&M quarterback. He didn't do anything spectacular, but he's a gutty kid. Here's one other stat about that game that also led to Florida State being on the field a lot, is that 14 possessions, only 14 possessions in that game, 7 for each team, the fewest in an FBS football game since 2020 at the end of the month of November in 2020.
It was old school, and I expected it to kind of be a little like that. I thought eventually, not just because Florida State, but because Georgia Tech last year, their offense was wide open too. I thought it would open up once they got comfortable and out of this game has started. We're in Ireland and all that. And then it went exactly the way that Brent Key and Georgia Tech wanted it to pretty much the rest of the time, save for about 7 plays that Florida State was able to make on, I think, pure athleticism. And outside of that, I mean, Brent Key coached circles around FSU today.
Brent Key, I said Brent Price. So Craig corrected me on that. Thank you very much. Now, one of the things that was new on Friday or Saturday, the 2-minute timeout. Chris Vanini, who's going to join us tomorrow, had a bunch of nuggets over the weekend. He asked coordinator Steve Shaw, why didn't they use 2-minute warning when they decided to have the 2-minute timeout at the end of each half? He said it's not a warning like originally was created in the NFL. Okay, but everyone is going to call it a 2-minute warning. And when they went to the 2-minute timeout, I was ready for it, but it still was very unique and trying to get used to that when it comes to college football. All right, one other note. Here's a pet peeve that I have, and you guys can hammer me on this or not. We have seen 1 week, a handful of games, and immediately I saw like the projections for the college football playoff and what it meant to Florida State. Yes, losing did not help them at all, but it was almost like that's going to be the new trend. It used to be the 4, and it's going to be wide open. I mean, 98% of the other teams haven't played a game, and I was already seeing the projections for the college football 12 because Florida State was going to be the projected winner of the ACC.
I mean, doesn't mean that they're not going to be still. Like that's the thing that I was able to kind of relax about this. Now, had this been a year ago, I'd have been like, well, good job, Norvell. Pissed it away already. But, like this is going to happen. You got to look at it more like an NFL season. If you're a fan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and they haul off and lose this week, are you like, well, that's it for the whole season? Like, no, you still have a chance to make the playoff. Just got to go win your league. Now it's harder for ACC teams, but again, because they're probably not going to get 2 if it comes down to it with them or the Big Ten and the SEC. But it's way more wide open now than it was.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the saving grace for Florida State, although I don't know if they're going to be good enough in the long run to win out or, only lose 1 more game and then go win the ACC. I think there's severe doubts about that after what we saw on Saturday. But it's not out of the realm of possibility, and that is now one of the new things about this college football landscape is, you have this 12-team playoff, so my recommendation to you would be to mute those terms if you don't want to see it, because it's only going to be talked about
every day,
more and more and more and more, because more teams are going to be in the race. So you want more teams to have chances. You don't want losses to be the death knell as much as they were. Then it's just going to lead to further speculation for longer into the season for more teams about their opportunity to get one of 12 spots. So if that's something you don't like, then do what I do when it comes to various topics at any given time where I just get sick of hearing about it and I mute the term and then I go and unmute it a few days later or whatever the case. So if you're getting annoyed by it after like a handful of games have been played, well, buddy, this weekend you're going to be seeing a whole heck of a lot of playoff graphics and things like that when everybody else gets a chance to play. And undoubtedly there is another upset or two or three or whatever we're in the works for this weekend, which I can't wait for after the little taste test that we got. But yeah, I think that's probably just going to be a new wrinkle to this season is more playoff talk every week because more people are involved and losses don't eliminate you like they seemingly would have this Saturday. They wouldn't have eliminated Florida State either in a 14 playoff, but it would have made them like basically have to be perfect the rest of the way. And they still kind of have to be that way, no doubt about it, but there's more wiggle room for sure.
Early losses seem to stick with people more than maybe even something in October, November.
They did.
Yeah.
Will they still? I mean, that's the question. We don't know yet, but this is all, I mean, the biggest thing here is not even so much the playoff. It is because there's people that picked Florida State in the playoff. There's people that picked Florida State to win the ACC. But I think just the biggest thing about this was it's the first game. It was a good game. It was an entertaining game. For a first game, you don't know what you're going to get exactly when you've had all this time off, but it was competitive down to the wire and a thriller and a big upset right out of the gates. I don't think you could have asked for much more unless you're an FSU fan where you've had this entire offseason where, depending on what kind of FSU fan you are, all of you have been bitter about what happened last year, and understandably so. Some, though, have been probably a bit over the line. It almost felt like, especially when SMU was looking like they were going to lose, of like, is this the karma weekend of like everybody who talked trash all offseason was going to lose right out of the gates? So that did feel a little bit like karma for some, not all Noles fans. And I've been there before. You're so excited about the offseason and all this time, and then you finally get to the season and you lose that very first game, and it's just so deflating.
Well, you could still win. Like you could still go down and go. Now, it's a conference loss. That doesn't help, and who knows where Georgia Tech will be at the end, but you could still win the ACC. You just won't be ranked very high if in fact, the ACC winner has one or two losses or more. Dustin Poirier, a UFC fighter, a champion at times, was in Waco on Friday. Craig, I sent this to you and thought this was pretty cool because if you're, you like that sport. Dave Aranda loves that sport. He came by. Everyone always has some kind of a special guest speaker. And Dustin Poirier was in town. Baylor, Dave Aranda has his opening press conference today. They play Tarleton on Saturday night.
Yeah, that's cool. Dustin Poirier is a great fighter, and I don't know what led to them other than Dave Aranda's a big MMA and boxing fan. He's got a great respect and appreciation for those sports, those combat sports. And, I mean, let's get it kind of clear. I'm not like a diehard UFC fan, but I do like the sport, and I do know and have watched Dustin Poirier many, many times, but I'm not like I like wrestling way more than I like the UFC. I think sometimes I get mistaken for like some big UFC buff. I love it, but it's not like my favorite thing in the world. But
let's put it this way. I never would have heard of Dustin Poirier had I not been watching probably a few of those with you.
Yeah, sometimes people think I'm a bigger fan than I am, but no, I'm a fan, and I'm a fan of Dustin Poirier's, and he's a great fighter and has been in some classics. And I think in terms of a guy preaching to people about hard work and toughness and championships and things like that, yeah, he's one of the best guys out there, and it seemed like it went really well. So don't know what spurred that, but that's cool, and I'm sure it was a real treat for the players and coaches to have a world champion walking through your hallways.
Texas Tech. There are conferences who are doing this. Texas Tech will provide availability reports every Monday, designating players out for the season, out or questionable for the next game. This will be updated about 45 minutes prior to kickoff. What this also does, it seems like to me, one, is it keeps people pretty honest. And number two, it might take coaches having to answer questions throughout the week about a player injured. That doesn't mean if it's a starting quarterback or a player that's a pretty big name that he won't be asked to update where they are. But I like this trend in college football. Texas Tech has joined that trend. Houston, we hear about Colorado a lot. A lot of new players, transfers. Joseph Duarte with this nugget today. 63 newcomers on the University of Houston football program roster with Willie Fritz's first year. Tied with Colorado for the most among the Power 4 schools. 36 transfers, second to Colorado. among the Power 4 schools. He has taken that roster and chewed it up, spit it out, and also brought in a new menu.
Yeah, absolutely has, and it's going to be. Yeah, sorry, I'm a little. I got a frog in my throat this week.
It's like you weren't ready for this one.
I was not ready for this one. But no, they absolutely needed a new roster. They need to be better, right? They need to go out and get it. They have a new coach. It's not surprising that you do in this modern age that you have the newest and best, tightest roster that you can. Now it's going to be a work in progress for sure. But people like his quarterback all of a sudden. I mean, you hear people talking about Donovan Smith as a kind of a dark horse for
a lot of the NFL type of gurus or draft type analysts seem like they like him quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see Donovan Smith. I mean, he's definitely got some physical tools that you love. I just feel like last year, big mistakes in big situations, and if he can get over that and not turn the ball over as much and just be a little bit sharper, then I think that could go a really long way and maybe takes Houston a little bit further than they expected to in a year where not a lot is expected of Houston. But, I mean, yeah, a new coach comes in, they're going to churn the roster. I think that's just we've got all these transfer portal stats and what Dion did and what Fritz has done. I mean, that's the deal, man. That's the game that's being played nowadays. So it's not like when we first saw this, it was like, oh, my God, there's 15 players in the transfer portal. It's like rosters flip like crazy, and that's just the way of the world now. So I think with the shape that Houston's roster was in, with Willie Fritz and his staff wanting to come in there and shake things up, it's only natural that, yeah, you had a lot of turnover. So I'm interested to see what that looks like, because it does make any projection you have of Houston a little bit more difficult to really peg, because there's so much new that it's hard to say, well, they were bad last year. Well, it's not even the same team really, and it's not even the same coaching staff. So the whole transitive property doesn't really work that way, and I'm interested to see how quickly Willie Fritz and company can get Houston into a place where they're competitive and winning some games. But yeah, the Donovan Smith love going around is interesting, and I think that says something about his talents, and maybe that people are underselling them a little bit if some of those transfers hit and he turns out to be as good as advertised. And on the Texas Tech injury report, I mean, that's cool that they're taking that initiative. I don't know how quickly others will follow. I don't know how that'll catch on, at least early on in the season, because I don't know that everybody's quite figured out the advantages and disadvantages of that yet, but I appreciate their transparency, and I'm sure the folks like us all around covering them appreciate that transparency each week when it comes to injuries. Although, like it says, like an hour before game time, you'll really know. So the weekly stuff is – the NFL plays games all the time. Like CeeDee Lamb's questionable, and it's like CeeDee Lamb's just not practicing because his ankle's sore. He's going to play on Sunday, and I think it'll probably be similar to that. So I don't know how much you'll glean from it really, and how much gamesmanship there will be, but that could definitely be a trend we see catch on, and I don't think there's anything negative with it really.
Garrett, let's go to the Big 12 and UConn and skip over the quarterback at Western Kentucky for right now. I know this was on Friday. What were your thoughts overall? I'm not sure how much you guys had a chance. The reaction I got from a lot of basketball people, Rob Douster, Jeff Goodman, among others, was, why don't these people making the decisions leave this damn game alone? Now, the UConn thing has been there before. Whether your mark is trying to scratch that itch again, I don't know. In my opinion, you can't really change the college basketball money you're going to get anytime soon. And I don't know, there's no way that they could bring enough money in as far as TV for now. What was the overall reaction, Craig and Paul, from this story that came in Friday afternoon?
Well, initially my thought is, and thinking about it over the weekend, I really hate the timing of it. Like, football season just got here, and what's the story right as they're about to kick off the first games? It's like, oh, let's revisit some more Big 12 and realignment. And you know what? For the realignment junkies, like, hey, it's like, man, give it to me 24/7, 7 days a week, any time of year.
Yep.
And so you got a little dose and got a little injection, and I thought it was interesting. Like, it perked me up, like, okay. But then I've thought about it more this week, and I'm just like, the timing sucks, man. Like, you've got all these great teams, these great players, this great offseason, and we're starting the football season, and we're going back to the realignment with UConn story right as this all gets underway. Like, we couldn't have done this a month ago. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
we couldn't have done this like 2 months ago.
I noticed the story, but I yawned It is nothing against UConn. It's just like, not now.
Yeah,
I
just
feel the same way.
I didn't like the timing of it with the very first weekend of football, and now we're revisiting all of this. So beyond that, though, just the timing piece, maybe that's just the only time you could do this, I suppose. But beyond that, I'm a college football guy, first and foremost, so I want the Big 12 to be as competitive as they possibly can be in football. And so the addition of UConn does absolutely nothing for me. And I saw a lot of, well, this will make them invest more, and this will, like, rising boats, like they'll go get in the Big 12 where they care more about football, and that'll force UConn to improve. And they're running the 2000s and all of that. Like, they haven't been around for 30 years. It's not a program that's been around for a long time, and they did have a streak of success in the 2000s. But I don't know, man. From a football point of view, I can't get excited about it. From a basketball point of view, obviously it would be an awesome move for the Big 12 as a conference to be able to pair them with Arizona and Kansas and Baylor and everybody else, Houston. So, from that standpoint, I get it. But like you, are we guaranteed that we know that the decoupling is going to occur with basketball, or is this just a pipe dream by Yormark, who very clearly has had UConn at the top of his wish list of to-dos since he arrived?
Over a year ago.
Oh, yeah. This is multiple visits with the UConn membership now that we've had with Brett Yormark. So it's clearly something he wants and he is adamant about. But is he going to be here in 10 years, 5 years? So, do you add UConn for this vision of his when he's not even around? So I think the presidents have to be smart and be very much forward-looking. But you've got to do what you got to do to increase the brand. And so if this does that, then all power to you. But from a football standpoint, and just overall, I don't love it.
Last time that this got to be a little bit hot and heavy, I was told by somebody very much up the pipeline of the Big 12 and among the schools in the Big 12 that he was going to lose all or at least some of the momentum he had gained by adding the 4 Pac-12 schools, because there were so many people that would have been against this. And I'm not so sure they still aren't. So this is interesting. And I'm not so sure now that this wasn't UConn who may have said, hey, can we talk about this again? Read a story, and I believe it might have come from Wetzel, and he's going to join us at 3:40, that it was UConn and their alums that want to be a part of a Power 4. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
And that they're willing, if doing that means that it might change a little bit about what they are, the tradition of being a part of the Big East.
Yeah, and I mean the thing from UConn's standpoint, it's very clear. They don't want to be left out. It's that simple.
Like SMU did by joining the ACC.
I mean, it's very simple from their viewpoint of we don't want to be left out. We don't want to be playing non-power basketball. We don't want to be out in the cold with a bunch of teams we feel like we are better than as a program, as an institution. So we need to get our money going. We need to step our game up. We need to go get into a power conference and ensure our survival. That's the UConn way of thinking. And I saw your Rob Douster tweet. You're talking about it was such an old man thing. It was and I get it, but can we not preserve tradition? It's read your replies, because the replies say very clearly why UConn fans want this. It's not that they want to leave the Big East because screw the Big East. It's because they know that the future that they want is not being a basketball school in the Big East. It's having a good football program. It's being a part of the mix of the playoff if you can somehow reach that, but you can only reach that if you get into a Big 12.
Right.
And so from their standpoint, it makes 100% sense why you would want to do that. From the Big 12, I think it makes less than 100% sense.
Pete Thamel had this just now. The Big 12 presidents, ADs met about UConn today. No vote was taken on admitting them. That was expected that they wouldn't vote. The call was informational in nature, discussion focused. It was led by the Big 12's outside consultant, walked them through UConn's media and market value.
Again, for basketball, it's great, but I agree with Craig. Even 7 years, what's going to happen to UConn football in the next 7 years that hasn't happened in the previous 100 of it?
Yeah.
That's going to make it to oh, hey, glad we bought low on UConn football.
That was the one catch, though, from Friday, that if you had a catch where you're okay, I guess, was that football wouldn't join right away, is that it would be the next television contract. So you'd get your fill and look, you wouldn't get basketball either for a couple of years, but you'd get a couple of years of basketball before the football, before the contract would roll back up, and you'd have to probably have football join at that point. That would be your agreement most likely. So, yeah, I saw a lot of that. Well, we'll just invest, or this will, like I said earlier, we'll be a part of this conference, and that will force us to have to invest. It's like, I don't think that it works like that. You just join a conference and your football program improves. So if you were to do that, the stunted, like everybody joins in a couple years and then football proves their worth, that makes some sense, but that also just seems like exactly. And where's the Big 12 in 7 years? Where are they when the contract rolls back around? I mean, who knows who's even still in the league at that point? All
right, UConn, by the way, did become not the first school to put a logo on the field, but the first school to put a logo of their collective, their NIL collective on the field today. That came out of over the weekend. That came from Brett McMurphy today on his Twitter feed.
And another note from I think Ralph Russo mentioned that the Gonzaga pursuit, how the Big 12 was like, no, we don't want to do that. Yormark wanted that, and the Big 12 officials or presidents were like, no, we're not interested in that. So it's going to be very curious to see how interested they are in UConn. And it does, like you put it that way, of maybe this is UConn pushing the buttons, and it could very well be that. I mean, if they're up there presenting and doing all that. But regardless, I don't like the timing, but I get the vision, although the vision I don't think is just an absolute 100% guarantee by any means.
We'll get to Michigan and the infractions and the notice and all of that as a full segment, along with a note or two about all the quarterbacks in the Big 12. Couple of quarterback notes. TJ Finley, who beat Baylor last year to open up the season at Texas State. He's at Texas State. He's been at LSU, Auburn, Texas State, and now Western Kentucky. And, of course, they open up against Alabama coming up this weekend. And speaking of quarterbacks, Kalani Sitake will go back to has said he will not reveal who starts a quarterback against Southern Illinois until the quarterback runs out on the field Saturday night, whether it's Gary Bohannon or Retzlaff.
Well, I mean, that's only a secret for one play. Garrett, TJ Finley didn't take snaps at LSU, did he?
Yeah, he did.
He did?
Yeah, he played a little bit. He just didn't. He wasn't that good.
Yeah. Okay. So he will have played quarterback now at 4 different actual in games, 4 different places.
I wonder how many others have done that. I bet there's more. There's probably a handful. Not a lot, I bet there's a handful.
Probably a handful at this point, and there'll probably be a bunch of people
done 3.
joining him in the next 5 to 10 years. I'd say that room gets a lot more crowded of guys that have done that. But, so did you mention where he went? I thought you mentioned Texas State, but Western Kentucky, right? Did you mention that?
No, they opened up against Alabama.
I didn't hear you say that. But
the Hilltoppers, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Western Kentucky for TJ Finley, just making sure there. But, good for him. 4th time's a charm, baby. I mean, I guess he had some moments like last year against Baylor. I mean, he was great to start off the season, and they had a really good year. I know, obviously, things changed in San Marcos and all that, but good luck to him as far as the BYU thing goes. That's very interesting how long this quarterback battle's drug out between Drake Retzlaff and Gary Bohannon, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not, quite honestly. I don't know if that's because they're both pushing each other and they're just both playing so well that you can't make a decision, or if nobody's emerging. And so I guess we'll find that in week number 1. But I'm not surprised to hear Gary Bohannon's pushing for the starting job. I mean, he's a very hardworking guy, very smart, and he's talented. So I don't think Jake Retzlaff showed anything last year where you're like, oh, yeah, he's the man here. So that's a little surprising it's still dragging on at this point. I don't know what that means if you're a BYU fan. You got to be a little bit nervous.
Yeah. By the way, welcome to the 4 schools, JT Daniels. Yeah. USC, Georgia, West Virginia, and Rice.
Yep. Yeah, I was not happy
Somebody
about
put that up in the chat room.
I was not happy about that last year doing stuff for the Earl Campbell Award, and it just bothered me that it's a Texas-based award, so you're going to have guys who are playing for Rice who are from California originally. And look, hey, you chose to come to Houston, Texas to play your college football. Like, you get to be a part of the award as a result of that, the Texas tie-in. But it did bother me a little bit when JT Daniels has no tie to the state of Texas other than Rice happened to be the school that he's going to end his career with. You know what I mean? Like, It was just like, I've been everywhere else.
Would he be eligible this year?
He's not playing.
No.
So
would he be eligible if he was at Rice this year?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, yeah, you just have to play at a Texas school. Yeah. That's my whole point is that he ended up there, but there was no real tie-in or anything. So it just felt a little emptier compared to guys who were from here or had been playing here for a couple of years. But, yeah, he was just a Rena guy. So I didn't really love that, but that's where we are. And so there's going to be more and more examples of that 4-quarterback club than just those 2.
Paul, You okay? You seem like you haven't paid a damn attention to anything we said most of this opening
I
segment.
noticed something on the thing that I had not finished yet because I was doing other things, so I was finishing it. So we'd have it for the show today.
What is that?
Our pick 'em pool.
Oh, you don't have that.
I had it set up like functionally, but not. I wanted the games picked before I sent the link out. So
Yeah, that would help.
yeah. So it was
Yeah.
it was functional.
And
like
by
as
the
far
way,
as,
Texas Beef House and the $100 gift cards to the winner each week. Thank you to Kim Coulter, who did this for us last year.
and I'm going to get a couple other things from other sponsors to kind of throw in like week by week, kind of like a special bonus prize as well.
When are you going to have that?
This week. I mean, like
This week?
they'll have them this week.
No,
yeah.
when can we predict the games?
Oh, we predict the games in about like. When we get to the commercial break, I'm going to ask you guys
Okay.
about your
All right.
opinion on the last game I need to pick.
Okay,
But there's going to be 10 games a week.
All right. By the way, Casey Thompson, fourth school. There's another one.
Yeah,
that's
there's
quarterback.
it's going to be a growing list in the next 5 to 10 years. There's going to be a lot of guys joining that list, I would imagine. But yeah, that's all the usual suspects. It feels like we've been talking about for about 10 years now at this point. And I guess Alan Bowman not quite there, almost. Had he decided to transfer one more time, he could have been a part of that. So, yeah, there's some 3-school guys as well. I imagine that list is probably a bit longer. But
Yeah, there's probably 2 or 3 other quarterbacks that are maybe more the top of mind. We just
hell,
again,
Gary Bohannon's been on 3
yes,
rosters.
Yeah, but Baylor, USF, and now with BYU. Okay, this is the first full weekend of college football. There's a lot to get to. We'll have loaded up every day with a lot of guests today with so much coming off that opening weekend. And a lot of guests. We have Dan Wetzel from Yahoo Sports. He and Ross Dellinger and Pat Forty do a podcast every single week, 3 times a week. He'll join us here with a lot of different topics to get to in the very next segment. All right, when we come back, you want to close out the segment? Anything else? You guys good?
SMU got really lucky.
Yeah.
SMU got really fortunate.
R.J. Maryland's going to join us tomorrow on the show, the wide receiver who caught what was the game-winning pass. You're right.
Yeah, that was a near scare for them, and he had the big catch there at the end, as you mentioned, and just college kids, man. You've got a game for Nevada where you're leading, and you've got the end in sight, and special teams blunder, or no, excuse me, not special teams, but the safety.
Yeah, the muff punt safety, or what it was. Was that what it was?
No, I'm talking about the handoff where you got stuffed on. On your own 1 yard line, and I think it might have been the muff punt that led to that. Yeah, that's
the
what
muff
you're talking
punt
about.
was
The same
recovered
thing.
in the end zone.
Yeah, I was talking about the actual play that he they got caught in the end zone. But yeah, you're right. That's what led to it, and that whole sequence is just like college football, man.
Yeah.
Like that's what happens. That's the type of stuff you don't see in the NFL hardly, if ever, because they don't make those kinds of mistakes. But that's what makes college football the game that it is. It's like an 18-year-old having to just do his special teams duty, and it turns into this SMU comeback.
Would have been a disastrous start for them.
It would have been because Nevada wasn't very. It's not been very good.
20-something.
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm talking about with Florida State's talking all this offseason. Had SMU gone and started the season, all ACC, and lost their very first game. I mean, that would have been atrocious for them.
It would have been the largest upset of an FBS game since Texas State was in Waco last year when they beat Baylor when they were like 28 or 27.5 point underdog.